everyone, and welcome to number 4 of our 7-part series, Wellbeing at Work, in partnership with the Global Wellness Institute's Workplace Wellbeing Initiative. Newton, I am thrilled, absolutely thrilled to have you as our guest today. As we were talking about just now, this is something I've really been looking forward to. This, let's have real talk. Let's get messy.
Yes, let's do it. We're all just humans.
Yeah. And just this idea today, we're going to be talking about strong enough. And Newton, you've been a real advocate for mental health, talking about it more openly, and also finding some real solutions. You know, you and I were talking about how there's a lot of conversation about it. There's lots of conversation about let's destigmatize mental health, but not much has changed. The research shows that, you know, a quarter of the workforce is struggling. That's probably an underestimate. And we have to go beyond the way we have been doing this. So special thanks to you for being our guest today to really break this down. As always, I always like to ask everybody where they're coming from. So Newton, I'm coming from San Francisco. How about you?
I am in Culver City, which people should just think of as Los Angeles, a little north of LAX airport.
Welcome from Culver City. We've got a little bit of rain here. Not sure how the weather is there.
We have perfect LA sun.
Okay, great. We've got Colleen coming in here from Atlanta, Georgia. We've got somebody coming in from Boston. Diana coming in from Vista, California. So again, for all of our listeners, please go ahead and share where you're coming from. So again, special thanks to Jessica Grossmeyer, Elizabeth Bachrad, Elinette Serrano, and all the members of the Workplace Wellbeing Initiative for partnering with us. The goal of the Workplace Wellbeing Initiative with Global Wellness Institute is to transform workplace well-being, enhance organizational performance, and empower a thriving workforce. And so AJ will be posting the link if you want to find out more about them. I wanted to also extend a special thanks to Dr. Colleen Seringer, who is your mental health spillover specialist. She'll be providing a follow-up video to recap and provide a commentary on our conversation today. So our topic today is strong enough. Our guest is Newton Cheng, world champion powerlifter.
Yep.
Let's just stop there for a moment. That's amazing. What's your record now?
Let's see. So I compete in the 123 pound weight class. I don't walk around at 123 pounds. It's like a very small adult man. But I can cut down to that weight for competition. So at that body weight, my best lifts are, let's see, 407 pound squat, 248 pound bench press, and a 553 pound deadlift.
That is crazy. And I also see that you are a fellow handstander.
Yes.
Do that on stage. I also love to do handstands as a former gymnast.
Yes.
Most importantly, though, Newton, you are a speaker and you're helping leaders to have more open conversations about mental health, and not only have conversations about it, not only model vulnerability, but also actually do something about it, really start to get at the root causes. You were the longtime director of health and performance at Google for 17 years. Is that correct?
I was at Google for 17 years. Yes.
And so you played a leading role in supporting the health and well-being of the workforce, and also the spiritual well-being of Google's workforce. And then as we talked about, you're a leader who's not afraid to talk about mental health, serving as a role model for others. And so one of the things that I just want to clarify for everyone who's listening, Newton is an amazing speaker. If you want to bring in someone to really get real about mental health, he's your guy. So
on that, can I challenge your audience? I'd like to see at least one question come through the comments where I look at it and I say, I don't want to answer that. Like, find the line. Let's have some real talk. Let's get some challenging conversation going.
Yeah, that was one thing we talked about, Newton. You were like, I like to be pushed to the edge. So I'm going to challenge everyone who is joining us today. We've got a good showing today. Over 100 people have registered. So thank you to everyone who is joining us from around the world. But please see if you can come up with that question that pushes Newton to the edge. And we will, of course, be taking your questions and comments as we go through this. So as we have been doing for this series, we will be doing a book giveaway. So please, if you would like to be considered for this, please write in "I'm in" to be part of the raffle. And you will receive not only Workplace Wellness That Works, my book that's now the 10-year anniversary. I can't believe it. And then also you will get a copy of Wellbeing at Work that just recently was released or just about to be released, and written by the amazing Jessica Grossmeyer. And this is your personal guide to really finding transformation and personal fulfillment in the workplace, even given all the challenges that we're in. So Newton, so again, please write in "I'm in" if you're interested. So Newton, let's begin with your story. And, however you would like to spin that out for us, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I'll cut through all the fancy resume stuff. I worked hard, went to some good schools, had good parents. Life worked out really well for me. Let's see, it was the end of 2021, towards the end of the pandemic. So at that point, I had been at a director level at Google for about a year. I had become a world champion powerlifter, a beautiful family. So on paper, I was killing it. I was about to give a keynote at a internal health and wellbeing conference at Google, which Laura, I think you might have been in attendance in that one. And at the time, I was coming to this realization that for everything I was achieving, life wasn't working out. I had been struggling with depression and anxiety for a long time. I thought it was from the pandemic, but as I learned more about mental health, I learned that things I had suppressed for a long time were actually struggles with depression and anxiety. And what finally got me to say I need to take action was it started to spill over into how I was showing up with my family. And I was ashamed and appalled that I couldn't be the father that I wanted to be and that couldn't be the husband that I wanted to be. So I was getting help from a therapist. I was planning to take mental health leave, but here I am, I'm about to give a keynote at this health and wellbeing conference. And so knowing how many people are struggling just like me, but hiding it due to stigma, it just felt wrong to hide that. And so I threw out my prepared keynote, and instead I got up and I told everyone what was really going on and that we needed to talk about that because we all knew the data, but we can't solve a problem if we won't talk openly about it. What happened after that was I had no idea if that would ruin my reputation, cut off a bunch of opportunities. Maybe it did. But what I did was it transformed my reputation to something I didn't expect. And it opened up all types of new opportunities to speak to leaders, organizations about mental health, and also model what it looks like to show up with vulnerability, which was something I had talked about a lot, but I had never gone to this extent. Now, fast forward, the next few years at Google after the pandemic were very up and down. And like a lot of the tech industry, it got pretty rough. Layoffs, cuts, a lot of really stressful things to go through. So just full transparency, by the end of 2024, I was actually planning to exit Google. I was actually more burned out than when I went on mental health leave, but I had better coping skills now. So I had persisted for longer, but I could see this is not going to be a good path for my family. 2 days after I sent an email to HR to say I plan to exit, my daughter was diagnosed with leukemia. And so I had to put those plans on hold just while we figured out what the prognosis was and what our healthcare requirements were going to be. So for most of 2025, I spent about 50% on leave from Google while helping my daughter navigate this journey of leukemia. And it's, on the one hand, it's been more connecting for my family than almost anything else we've done. It's kind of pushed all of our relationships, especially my marriage, to way to the edge, to the point where, I had to own up on a lot of stuff of like, okay, these are problems I'm bringing to the marriage because I'm not finding a better way to process this stress.
Mm.
And it was all reasonable the way I was showing up. Like, we had some real problems, but I still had to own it. Like, if I want a good marriage and I want to, be the husband and father I wanted to be. So all this stuff I knew about health and performance from working at Google in that area for 17 years, from being a world champion powerlifter, I pushed it all to the breaking point in 2025, to the point where there was a week where my wife said, why don't you take a week off? And I said, I can't do that. We got 2 kids. One's going through leukemia treatments. And she said, I think it would be better if you went and took a week off. I'm like, okay, I got it. Like, it's gotten that bad. I will go get my head clear. I went and took a week off. It took a little while, but I came back and I owned my shit. And we got to a much, much better place. And we continue to be there. But that's who's showing up today. I've since left Google. I'm deciding what's next, if anything, or if I just chill on the couch for a while. Chilling on the couch is pretty awesome if you haven't done it for a while. And I'm kind of just processing, like, looking at all the expertise I have and all the broken systems of health and well-being and performance, and kind of picking up the pieces and saying, like, well, I got to build a new system in this next phase of life. Like, where do we go from here?
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I just want to share, Newton, one of the memorable quotes, and I'm paraphrasing, was from a journalist with the New Yorker who wrote shortly after the loss of Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade. And that was back in 2018. And he wrote, Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade were almost inconceivably high functioning. The line between public triumph and personal despair is a treacherous one. And I feel like your story mirrors that disconnect between the public triumph, all of these successes that you were showing to the world, and yet what you were feeling inside, and bringing those 2 pieces together, which is what you're doing now. So kudos for you for doing that, and for giving permission to others, particularly other leaders, to do the same.
Thank you. Yeah, I think as I've worked at Google, and, Google can hire the smartest people in the world. So I think I'm pretty smart, but then you get to see what a super genius looks like up close, or a true edge case of humanity in terms of productivity. And you're like, oh, that's not me. And so even at Google, 99% of us, like, the life that I was leading behind the scenes, where I'm like, I'm getting it all done, but there would be mornings I'm like up at 4:30. I run to the garage to do my powerlifting training. My rest period in between sets is about 3 to 5 minutes. So the moment I set down this heavy squat, which could have crushed me, I have to run to my phone. I have 3 to 5 minutes to fire off a few emails. I've already outlined them in my head. I got to get that done. And if I don't do a whole 2-hour workout that way, I'm already behind for the day. Wow. If a kid gets up and says, like, I can't sleep, that whole plan's out the window. And then finally, when there's a quiet moment, it's not like, I'll take a walk. I'm literally on the floor, kind of gasping for air. And, like, I'm the health and performance expert guy, so I don't know what everyone else is experiencing. I'm hoping they're all secretly superhumans and they're not living that life, because that is not great for your marriage. It is not great for your relationship with your kids or with yourself.
Yeah, that and it's interesting how coping skills, as you brought up, is not enough. Really starting to look at the system itself. We have a question here from Murray. How do you speak to your boss about taking a mental health leave without feeling embarrassed?
Oh, I don't know. I was embarrassed every time. Okay. But I have this problem of, instead of making change ahead, like upstream, like, this is the problem of driven people. And once I name this, and you go into a company like a Google, a Meta, an Amazon, where you have all these, these $1 trillion companies that are trying to grow 20% year over year, you can imagine, like, what does the culture need to be? Even if it's like, Google has a wonderful human culture, but to run at that speed, there's a certain intensity which just needs to be innate to the people. So I was embarrassed every time I got to that. But the way that change would happen in my life is the consequences of not changing for me, damaging my marriage or damaging my relationship with my kids, were far more painful than being embarrassed in front of my boss. So unfortunately, with a lot of high achievers, like, you got to push them to a breaking point. I'm hoping that, over time, culture can change. So where that breaking point occurs moves. But I think if the operating system for your company is, I'm going to hire the most driven people, change will happen when you break them.
Wow. Change will happen when you break them.
Yeah.
That these hard driving people are going to just reach a point collectively where they say, enough, we need to change the system.
Yes. And I think what we're facing now is break them, unfortunately, is leading to like really bad scenarios. It's not just, a divorce that didn't have to happen is tragic. It's not a suicide, which is the things that, I'm not saying like, oh, that's rampant at Google or anywhere else, but macro level in the news, we see rise of those incidents. And I think we can all agree this is not the society we want.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a question from Colleen. Alana, do you mind sharing that? So Newton at Google, are they truly committed to supporting the mental health of their employees, or are they checking boxes, speaking from both sides of their mouth? It's not uncommon for a company to have this push-pull happening. Therefore, I'd love to hear where the opportunities were within Google to improve their efforts. And I think that this really gets at the piece of what we see over and over again, which is, the focus is so much around helping the individual to develop better coping skills, to become, quote, more resilient, but not necessarily on actually changing the systems or the operating system, as you speak to, that is breaking people in the first place.
Yeah, the way I think of that is not so much talking out both sides of their mouth. It's, the phrase I like to use a lot, and it's not mine, is, both these things can be true at the same time. Like, yes, we're humans and we need to nurture good health and well-being, not just for performance, but, for many very good reasons. At the same time, just factually, a company like Google, again, it's $1 trillion company that's trying to grow 20% year over year, and to just stay in the market and in competition, it can't run slower. Too late. Like, the machine is designed, and it would take decades to transform into something else that's maybe runs slower but is stable. So for today, like, it is what it is. Yeah. Both those things can be true at the same time. So on the one hand, for leaders, I say, like, what big bets are you going to place either on how you show up as a leader or how we're going to transform the company over time to address that? And you're just going to take all the punches along the way, because it's not going to change fast enough for anyone, because everyone's suffering. Not everyone, but many people are suffering in the process. At the same time, for those who are in the machine, let's face the facts of, this is a $1 trillion company that is trying to grow 20% year over year. It was that when you joined. It has been that the entire time. You're choosing to be here. And you saying, like, can't it run slower? Like, no. Like, you don't join the New York Yankees and then say, can we just play a few less games? Or like, like, maybe if both the teams don't try so hard, we can all rest our joints. Like, no, that's not the game. You signed up for that too. Both these things can be true at the same time.
A former guest, Gary Pincus, who was the managing director for North America McKinsey, and he spoke about, when I asked him to define what is well-being at work, he spoke about the social contract, that in agreeing to work with the organization, you are agreeing to a certain social contract. And so I think that's really interesting, this idea of kind of what the individual can be doing to both cope and to model vulnerability more. But at the same time, how does that pair up with this growth imperative? How might we start to curb that growth imperative a little bit over time so that it can become more sustainable for people, but also recognizing that you as an employee, you are signing up for that. So that's also something to be aware of. I think we had another question that came in. Alana, if we want to post that. So from Andrea, it sounds like the need to develop self-regulation and emotional coping mechanisms. How can organizations how can they embed these practices into the daily practice, into the daily operations?
Yeah, I'd say for embedding them into daily operations, there's no simple solutions here, but where I would say the most effective place to make changes is at the middle manager level. So now I'm painting something very singular, but to have change the middle manager level, there's actually a lot of things that have to work together. You have to get like buy-in from the most senior leadership. They have to allocate resources to institute some sort of change management and related program management efforts to drive that change across the middle managers. And then you have to make sure you're selecting change that's palatable enough to them that you can get a critical mass of the middle managers to change so that this takes root in your culture. So now I'll like boil it down to something much more specific. So at the middle manager level, like let's say it becomes practice for middle managers to start each of their team weekly meetings, assuming they have team weekly meetings, with space to just hear how people are doing personally. Now, that's not going to change things overnight, but what it does is it sets a new norm of like, yes, we do talk about these things here. We make space for them. And over time, it also gives people a chance to get those reps in with their teams of like, it's one thing to say we need to be more vulnerable. It's another thing to actually be vulnerable. So it's kind of like if you said, when I ask people to evaluate their mental health campaigns or, health and well-being culture campaigns, does it sound like let's get out whatever you're asking them to do with their health and well-being, and instead let's replace it with singing karaoke? And if it sounds like you're just running a big campaign to tell people how important it is for people to sing karaoke, but no one's singing karaoke and no one is celebrating those who are singing karaoke like it's the best thing happening at your company, you're screwed. Nothing's going to change. So there has to be a place where people are actually singing karaoke, or in this case, practicing vulnerability and doing it repeatedly, even if it's bad, so they get the practice until it's good.
One of the things that I've, as I think you may know, Newton, and certainly people who are listening in know this, the middle manager has really been my primary focus for nearly 15 years. And whether or not there's well-being, whether or not that's part of the job description, every manager is in fact uniquely positioned to make or break the well-being, particularly the mental health of the people that they lead. And the culture that people experience when they are at work is largely the culture that they experience within the team. So there's so much room for every middle manager to really begin carving out these little cultures of well-being. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about this space for sharing and getting the reps within the team, and really tie this to psychological safety. And I know that Project Aristotle happened at Google, and the number one factor that they found in terms of a high-performing team is psychological safety. And in order for there to be psychological safety, there needs to be things like people need to be paying attention to air time. So there's shared air time within the team. So I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit about how people actually help to expand psychological safety across the team.
I think it made a lot of progress by putting psychological safety at the forefront of what was like foundational for great teams. And that led to a lot of ongoing conversation around like, how do we help nurture that across the organization? I think where it started to hit its limit, where I think Google does a really good job of it's not universal, but across managers, like training them to do things like, okay, make sure that like you don't have people dominating, make sure you are like amplifying underheard voices. But where I think it started to hit its limit and something deeper was needed, at least for the way we were doing psychological safety, is when it became clear that we were having a lot of struggles with mental health, you know, like across companies like Google. And so at that point, what happened was, you know, we all saw the data. And this was before I had my own struggles with mental health or that I was aware of. And so we all turned to HR and said, okay, we're not the experts on this. You got to give us the talking points. We're all trying to learn with you. And we would do our best to deliver those talking points. Now, what I learned was having to go through, like calling back to Murray's question of like, okay, well, I'm not seeing our CEO model the vulnerability that I need to express right now to say like, I'm not doing well. I really need help. And so at some point, again, I got pushed to a breaking point where it was like, do I break my relationship with my family or break my relationship with Google or risk doing that? Mm-hmm. And it was clear. It was like, I risk breaking with Google. And so I got over the embarrassment and I said something. Now, as I did that, and then I did it, you know, in places like the Vitality Lab or Internal Health and Wellbeing Conference, and I do it with my team, what I could watch was like a new type of psychological safety set in. Like I'll label it very specifically. It's like, oh, the leader did this thing. It is okay for us to do that. It doesn't make it not embarrassing, but it's like, this is now in a cone of acceptability. The thing that I saw was that only trickled down and maybe to my peers, very little upward.
Yeah.
Like it would get celebrated upward, but the behavior doesn't trickle upward. So that's where I had this weird experience that I'm still trying to interpret from when I was leaving Google over the last few weeks. And I would see someone in the hallway and I tell them like, hey, just so you know, I'm leaving on September 7th. And in many different ways, people would say like, oh, like it's not going to be the same without you. And that's, you know, I think a common message many of us might hear when we're leaving. And I can interpret that two ways. One is I'm going to miss you. And a lot of it was that. But what I also saw that kind of was unspoken was there was a desperation in that statement from people where what I realized was, oh, if I'm not doing this here, there's nothing to point to say, can other leaders do that? Because I need that in my meetings. And so as I think about psychological safety, you know, whether we want to call it being vulnerable or again, using the karaoke example, is there anyone in your culture you can point to and say, can we all try to be more like that?
I love this idea of cone of acceptability and the role that managers play in that and leaders. And I also really appreciate your highlighting this notion that while it gets celebrated with more senior leaders, it's not necessarily emulated, and that it's really the behaviors that people are looking to. So I want to make sure that I cannot believe we're almost at the end of our time here together. I want to make sure that we do our draw. So Alana, if you could share with us who the winner is. So Adrian Wong, congratulations. We'll be getting your address. You will be receiving 2 books in the mail. So congratulations to you. I want to also remind you all that please stay tuned in for the follow-up video with Colleen. And I also wanted to, again, thank GWI Workplace Wellbeing Initiative for partnering on this and for helping to develop this. Next up is Dr. David Katz, who is world-renowned public health expert, co-author of What to Eat, who will offer a bold systems-based approach to what's happening really across America with our health and well-being. And boy, do we need that. That's going to be on October 22nd, 9 to 9:30 Pacific time. Newton, please share with us top 3 takeaways from our conversation today.
Sure. So in this day and age, if you really want health and well-being to be part of your culture, vulnerable leadership is a core competency. like I said, like it's the vulnerability. It's critical to supporting health and well-being for this moment we're in. And it has to be modeled by the leaders because the behaviors only trickle down. They don't trickle up. Next, you might say like, well, none of us were trained in that. We're actually trained to not be vulnerable. So this is just an unworkable solution. But like any core competency, vulnerability is like a muscle. It can be developed over time. And I could tell you my approach to it, but it's based very much on the author Carol Robbins' book, Connect. That's probably the best, most practical guide I've found for that. So go check out Carol Robbins' stuff. And then finally, for any of the health and well-being professionals on this call, you notice I've gotten a lot into like organizational dynamics, the politics, the culture, and how it interacts with the business model. If you come with a health and well-being solution to a company like Google, and you're not prepared to be a full stack consultant to help them implement the solution, to manage change and integrate it with their business strategy, and not moralize the whole thing, be like, well, of course it's good, it's health and well-being. You can't do that. Or you will not get your seat at the table. And if you're not prepared to talk on all those levels, you have an incomplete solution. And many of us cannot hire you because we don't have the bandwidth to do those things ourselves.
So this idea of vulnerability is a core competency. None of us are trained in this, and we can be trained in this. And let's not lean too much into the moral aspect of this. As important as it is, let's think about the organizational dynamics and how we can actually have a seat at the table to actually make change. Newton, I want to thank you so much for being our guest today. And also a reminder to everyone, Carol Robbins was in fact a guest of ours earlier. So we'll be sure to share that so you can listen in to her. She's one of my all-time favorites as well. The 15% rule of hers is great, and you can listen in to learn more about that. Newton, you truly are one in a million. Thank you for the important work that you do to really expand this conversation and to be that model. We all, starting with myself, we love you so much.
Thank you.
For who you are as a human being, but for what you are doing in this world. And I also want to remind everyone, you can follow Newton's work on LinkedIn. And AJ should share the link to your profile there, and his recent TEDx talk will be shared. So please check that out. He's talking about polarization and what each of us can do to push back on that. So again, thank you. And thank you to all of our guests. We'll see you in October. Take care.
Thank you.